Story 1. This happened to me earlier this morning. I just moved to a new city less than a month ago and have been checking out the parks where dogs are required to be on leash. I have an older dog, a little terrier, and he's been attacked in the past by large dogs, so random dogs running up to him off leash freaks him out. It also makes me a bit nervous because I was also attacked as a kid by a dog bit in the face, almost lost a cheek, and had to have reconstructive plastic surgery. But by and large I love animals, especially dogs, because 9 times out of 10 a dog's bad behavior is because of the owner, so I don't blame the dog. So at a new on-leash park this morning, things are going fine until my dog and I walk over a rise, and further down the trail about 20-25 yards is a woman with 2 dogs, both off leash. The little whiner dog is going nowhere fast, but the German Shepherd sees me and my dog and immediately bolts for us, barking. I picked up my terrier and get him lifted up over my head by the time the German Shepherd reaches us. I've learned over the last 5 years of having him that this is the easier way to keep him calm. Her dog is now right there. It's growling and trying to jump up and get at my dog. I loudly told the woman to call off her dog. She just stands there watching. Her dog makes another jumping lunge for mine, so I used my legs to push it away and yelled, "Call off your dog" again. This apparently pisses her off because she completely lost it. This woman starts screaming at me, calling me bitch, and to get out of my park, and stop kicking my dog, you cunt. I'm not kicking her dog. I'm still just using my legs to deflect her dog each time it tries to jump up at my dog that I still have held up over my head. I yelled again, "Call off your dog. If it bites, I will call the police." She called her dog off then, but it took a few attempts before it stopped. At no point did this woman even move from where she was. She just stood there until her dog finally responded to her command and went back to her. As soon as she had him by the collar, she started to cuss me out again, telling me to get out of my park. Took off back to the parking area with my dog and got him in my car. Is it over? Oh no. This woman also comes into the parking area and starts loading her dogs into her car, while continuing to scream at me. How I've ruined her day, reiterating that it's her park, she can do whatever she wants there, with more swearing peppered through her tirade. I took the opportunity to snap a picture of her and her license plate and Google the local non-emergency line and dial. This makes her visibly angrier, and she looks like she's going to come across the parking area toward home until I start talking into the phone about how I'd like to make a report about an aggressive dog and woman in the park. Woman proceeds to get into her car and leave in a hurry at that point, still cursing and swearing at me, which definitely helped confirm the validity of my call. Edit. Just adding that I decided to call the non-emergency line anyways because while her dog didn't bite me, her utter lack of concern and her behavior coupled with her dog being aggressive makes me worried this won't be an isolated issue. The park in question has a large play area for children near the parking lot, and I would hate this woman's entitlement to result in a child or someone else and their dog there being harmed by her lack of desire to follow the clearly posted rules to keep dogs leashed. I don't like to stereotype, but this woman was the epitome of entitled Karen. I'd say late 50s, early 60s, white, that haircut, and driving a new green Kia Sport. But Karen either needs to get back on her meds or start some because the absolute conviction she kept screaming about the park being hers was off the charts. Story 2. About 11 years ago, I moved into a new country to be with my now wife. We had a baby together and money was tight since my job was about 25% and was not paying the bills. I got a job in this company where I was supposed to be working in my field of education, 3D technical drawing. When I started the job, it turned out that the company hasn't bought the 3D software yet, and until they did, I was to help out in a different job, powder coating the big metal products we were producing. They never got the 3D software BTW. Like I said, we had a baby, and I didn't ROI have a choice, so I decided to stay and just work, hoping that I would get to work in what I was supposed to quickly. The equipment I was using was 30 years old. From the power gun to the powder booth and the ventilation system, the system that is supposed to suck away the excess powder that doesn't stick to the product and trap it so it doesn't get released to the air and the operator me breathes it in. On top of that, the room where this was being performed was a semi-underground concrete room with a tiny window, and the filter was leaky as hell, so every time I turned on the ventilation, the whole room filled with powder. I did have a mask I was supposed to have on, but there's no way of having it on for 8 hours shift. And the battery didn't last that long anyway. I complained to my boss about all this many times. He is the owner of the company. I told him about the filter, the old system, the tiny window. I even asked for a fan, which I had to buy with my own money. He just said over and over that the company had no money for all these upgrades, as he called them. I'll just point out that while this was happening, he upgraded his house, built a brand new cabin, and drove a brand new Mercedes. All this happened over 6 years. The owner of the company was old, around 70, and didn't want to keep working, so he kept trying to bring managers to take over, but they never worked out and he had to pay them out. That's another thing, he always had money for around $10K, $30K each. Over the years I talked to my colleagues about these issues. They told me nothing will ever happen. Other people who worked there, the company existed for 50 years, have tried getting upgrades to the machinery, and he never allowed it. He took over after his dad died. After around 5.5 years of breathing this stuff, I was in a really bad place. I was coughing like a super heavy smoker. I never smoked. I was so tired the whole day, I fell asleep driving home. When I came home, I just collapsed on the sofa. I was around 27 years old at the time, and would not wake up until night time or the next day, black around the eyes, constant headaches, etc., etc. I contacted my doctor and told him everything, and he sent me to a department at the hospital that deals with work-related injuries and sickness. They tested my lungs over a few weeks period and consulted previous tests. I took the company as obligated to send the workers to a yearly checkup here and concluded that I indeed have lung damage. Prolonged exposure to epoxy-based powder coating has caused permanent damage to my lungs and caused all the aforementioned issues. The specialist doctor told me I was not allowed to return to that room ever again. I booked a meeting with my boss and had my union rep with me. Another thing I didn't mention is I have been searching for work for the last few weeks and have secured a new workplace already. In the meeting, I told my boss everything that has happened, and he still refused to take any responsibility. He insisted that everything is fine with that room and system, and the next person they would hire would use it. He said I did a very good job when I was at work, but I was sick a lot. I wonder why. I left the same day and never looked back. I also sued his insurance company and received compensation from them. On top of that, I now receive a monthly stipend from the government, nothing major, around $100, but it's still helpful for the rest of my life. My petty revenge came a month or so after I got a phone call from one of the guys I worked with asking if I was willing to come in for a day to train the guy they hired because he couldn't figure out how to do the job. It's not a very complicated job, but you need guidance to do it right. Not to mention all that shitty old machinery is finicky as hell and takes getting used to in order to get good quality product. A few months after the company closed, he had to sell it at a lose because of his bad management. He would ignore customer complaints, go on vacations when we had problems, treat employees badly, lie to both employees, the government and clients. I feel bad for the other guys who lost their jobs. Hopefully, they all found new jobs. My new job was in the profession I was educated in. It was much closer to home, better paid, and with a really nice boss to boot. Today, I work as a programmer for a tech company and have a pretty nice life. Not making fat money yet, hoping to in the future. But not anywhere close to the poverty we were in when I took that first job. Story 3. My mother and I have been through a lot. We've had multiple phases where our relationship has been rocky, and this year it's only gotten worse. At the beginning of the summer, I gave her an ultimatum. We're not able to work through this on our own anymore, and we need a therapist. I also set a boundary that she's not allowed to say things that invalidate my experience, like, I never did that, or, that didn't happen. Yesterday, my mom did one of the things she usually does. She said, I'm going to tell you something you probably won't like to hear. This time, it was a familiar one. I feel like you don't care about contributing to the household because you won't give me your leftover school grant money after your tuition is paid. I stayed silent because we've had this conversation 5 times already. It's not worth telling her the same things again, only to start another argument. So, I left it alone and walked away. Less than an hour later, she said, "I have something else I want to say." At that point, I told her no. I said I didn't want to talk or repeat the same conversation we've had. She pushed me, and I lost my temper a bit. She then expressed that she thought she'd had an epiphany about why she was feeling the way she did. I apologized, saying, "I'm sorry I blew up. Let me calm down for a minute." We went on to have a fairly productive conversation until I triggered her. I put "trigger" in quotes not because I don't believe in triggers, but because this particular trigger is any description of her behavior as negative. Words that are off limits because of this trigger include yell, shout, scream, snap, snarl, gripe, complain, criticize, raise your voice, nasty, mean, loud, tense, or angry. We were having a productive conversation about appreciation and the ability to show it. She mentioned how she wishes I would do work in front of her or talk to her when she looks tired. I explained that I've trained myself not to do those things because, sometimes, it's the wrong thing to do, and she yells at me. Of course, I didn't say that because I was dancing around the trigger words. I believe my exact sentence was, "You can have a negative reaction, snap, or yell at me, or just be upset." Her reaction to this trigger is always the same. She dismisses what I'm saying and tells me it didn't happen. This is really hard for me to hear because I haven't yelled at you for years. Earlier in the summer, we had a fight that led to me giving her the ultimatum about finding a therapist. In that argument, I managed to meet all her requirements of regulating my behavior and walked away appropriately, even though she was yelling at me from the kitchen as I went down the stairs. So, I walked away as I had told her I would whenever she invalidated my experience. We didn't talk for the rest of that day. Today, everyone was sleeping in. I saw on my phone that she had to go out at 2 a.m. to help a family friend, so I took care of the dogs. I was finishing up my breakfast in the kitchen when suddenly everyone else in the household appeared. My mom thanked me for feeding the dogs, and I wanted to snap at her. I was frustrated about the day before, angry at her, and resentful that she could go out of her way to help this random kid, but doesn't care enough about our relationship to manage her own triggers. So, I didn't say anything. I ignored her, took my food, and left. I didn't trust myself to say anything nice, so I chose silence. A few minutes later, she came down to my room and asked if I wasn't speaking to her. I said no, I wasn't. She asked why, and I replied that I was feeling angry. This was unacceptable to her. She kept asking, "Why could you possibly be angry? Everything went well, everyone did great." She was standing in my doorway, trapping me in my room, and in this conversation, demanding an explanation for why I felt the way I did and why I chose not to engage with her. I tried to stay as calm as possible and communicate clearly about my feelings, but nothing I said was acceptable to her. It wasn't okay for me to feel angry because of her actions. It wasn't okay for me to feel frustrated that she can't manage her triggers. It wasn't okay for me to be upset that I'm always the one who has to walk away from the situation. She stood there, glaring at me, telling me to calm down, and I had no way to escape. She had trapped me in my room and kept insisting that nothing had happened. In the end, I had to yell at her to leave to get her out of my doorway and out of the conversation. She's allowed to tell me when I'm too loud, when I sound angry, when I'm shouting, or when I'm upset. She's allowed to tell me that I'm invalidating her feelings whenever she wants, or that I need to calm down or walk away. But she never walks away. She never manages her triggers or treats me with the basic respect of assuming I'm not lying to make her look bad. I'm so tired of this. She believes she's entitled to my emotional support whenever she wants it, without considering what I'm thinking or feeling. She feels entitled to say whatever she wants about my behavior. But if I criticize her, I'm the bad guy, and suddenly, nothing happened. She never apologizes for her behavior, never makes amends, and never changes. She thinks she's entitled to my constant improvement without putting any effort into our relationship. I wish I didn't have to live here. My life is the best it's been in a long time, and she seems determined to make sure the beginning of my semester is a nightmare. I'm so close to starting a real career and finally breaking free from this mess. I'm about to reach a goal I've been working toward for so long, but she doesn't see that she's burning bridges between us by refusing to even try to improve our relationship. Story 4. I and my mom, 19F and 41F, had our weekly Saturday workout today and decided afterwards to go to the store Walmart, where all the crazies go to pick up some snacks and groceries. After we got there, though, we ran into our entitled family of the story, though more accurately the entitled mother, Karen 40F, her 3 kids Jack 15M, Sabrina 13F, and Tommy 6M, and last, but certainly not least, was their small dog, maybe a Papillon or something, Idic. If you didn't know, most stores in the US don't allow dogs inside unless they're a service animal. At this particular store, though, no one can actually come up and ask you if your dog is service animal, and they have to just let you go. The only rule they otherwise have is that the dogs aren't allowed in the baskets, the big part of the cart, since people put food there. This, of course, is where the problem starts. As me and my mom are leaving the meat section to go to the dairy section, we run into our first encounter with Karen and her family. Both of her older kids, Jack and Sabrina, are standing off to the side looking extremely embarrassed, while their little brother Tommy is just standing there looking a little bit bored. Karen is standing there yelling at insulting an employee. The reason she was interacting with his employee in the first place was because her dog is sitting in the basket of the cart. Every time the employee tried to explain to Karen that dogs aren't allowed to sit in the basket of the cart, Karen kept biting back, saying that her dog was a service animal. While all of this is happening, myself, my mom, and everyone else in the store is rubbernecking and staring at this woman. So many people were watching that there was a small traffic jam between the meat and dairy section of the store. Eventually, though, Karen lets up and puts her purse in the actual designated seating area on the cart for her dog to sit on, yelling at her kids to help her the entire time. But I wouldn't be writing this. This was the end of the story. By the time me and my mom are done with shopping, we have an entirely full cart, even needing an extra one for us to transfer the groceries into. And lo and behold, can you guess who is standing by the self-checkout? We see here Karen yelling at an employee demanding the manager because another employee was acting very disrespectfully to me. All 3 employees by the self-checkout ended up on the radio paging their manager. Let's call her Amanda 30F, and she showed to a huffing Karen. Now this is where it gets interesting, as Karen is standing there, half screaming at the manager, telling her that your employee was very rude to me, and that your employee called me stupid, and other things that I didn't 100% hear that fell into the same category. All of this, of course, wasn't true. She was only referring to the incident by the meat and dairy department, and from what I had heard, the employee was just calmly trying to explain to her that she couldn't have her dog in the basket. That's it. No insults, no implying that the dog wasn't a service dog. Nothing. My mom even ended up telling me that after the woman left that she would want to talk to the manager and explain what she had seen to make sure that the employee didn't get in trouble. Of course, this is not where the craziness ends. Since my mom was the one bagging all the groceries, I was eavesdropping to see if there was anything interesting that Karen said, and there was something that shocked me, to be honest. Karen tried to argue that the reason that her dog was in the store was because someone in her family was autistic, and the dog was some form of therapy dog. Therapy dogs are also not allowed in the store, only trained service dogs. Now, I'm not going to say that I know everything about autism, but I have 2 younger brothers, 12 and 13, who are both pretty low mid-functioning autistic, and I know even more kids with autism from different birthday parties and school board meetings I've been to. And I want to say that because I have never heard of an autism service dog until now. Autism service dogs are a real thing though, so it was almost willing to give her the benefit of the doubt, until I actually paid attention to her kids. Again, not claiming I'm an expert on autism or anything, but none of her kids were acting in a way that would imply that any of them had autism. Both Jack and Sabrina, the two teenagers, looked incredibly embarrassed and scared as their mom talked, and both of them ended up hiding in their sweatshirts, standing a few feet away from her. I also paid attention to the youngest boy, Tommy. The entire time Karen was yelling at the manager, Amanda, Tommy was off to the side fiddling with the pockets of his sweatshirt and walking around to the cart. And again, I don't know everything about autism, but for my brothers and the about 8+ other autistic kids I've ever met, they would be freaking out in a situation like this. They won't just be standing off to the side twiddling their thumbs. They would probably honestly be upset and be trying to leave or having a complete meltdown or at least hiding behind their parent. Even ignoring that, if any of her kids were autistic, no one else was watching them. There was no father at the store, and none of the kids were paying attention to each other, and neither was their mother. Is there a possibility that we're higher functioning? Yes. But you don't come to the store with a dog that you claim is service animal, without a leash, without a harness, without any form of service dog identification. Yell at the staff because they ask you to take the dog out of the basket of the cart, and then demand a manager and lie about what the employee who talked to you said. Eventually, Karen and her posse stormed off into the women's clothes section, and my mom went to tell the manager what she had seen, and apparently many other people went up to talk to her too. I have no idea what else has happened with them, or if anything else will happen because of this. My mom intends to stay on Facebook to see if anything pops up there. As we were leaving, this though came to my head. I don't know if I came up with it or heard it somewhere, but I think it fits the bill here. Don't use a disability to substitute your own inability to be a good person. Even if her kids were disabled in some way, she didn't have any right to be such a horrible, entitled person to the staff. Story 5. I've heard a few of these stories in audio readings and figured I'd share my own modest story. This took place a few years ago, somewhere between 2012 and 2020, so my memories of the event are a bit hazy. I was either in my late teens or early 20s, and now I'm in my 30s. During this time, I was involved in a local community theater for quite a while. It was very informal. While some people had real theatrical experience or aspirations, it was mostly a place where anyone interested in live theater could participate, either as an actor or part of the audience. We also had a youth theater, so there were often younger people around. Although we didn't have an official costume designer, one woman unofficially took on that role. Let's call her Karen. Typically, Karen could be nice and helpful enough. However, she had a tendency to be arrogant. She'd frequently brag about her 30 years of experience, and so on. For example, when we were working on a Ghost of Christmas Future costume for me, she suggested I wear a doublet. From the way she phrased it, I could tell she thought a doublet was some kind of pants, like pantaloons. Being a Shakespeare enthusiast at the time, I knew a doublet was more like a jacket, so I said as much. Karen got this smug, condescending attitude and was convinced I didn't know what I was talking about, remarking, "He's actually going to try and prove me wrong on this," in a patronizing tone. Imagine that attitude in her other interactions, and you'll get a good sense of the kind of person she was. For anyone curious, a quick Google search will tell you what a doublet actually is. Ha. Now, on to the story in question. We were in the middle of a dress rehearsal for a play, and of course, we needed our costumes. A bunch of us, along with the director and owner of the building, let's call him Mitch, showed up early to set up, only to find the dressing rooms locked. The issue was that this was an older building, and the dressing rooms didn't have conventional locks. They could lock from the inside, but on the outside, there was just a small hole that you could only fit a thin tool through. We spent several minutes trying to jimmy the doors open using things like credit cards. Eventually, we got them open, and the general assumption was that one of the kids had locked them, not realizing they couldn't be easily unlocked from the outside. So, I took it upon myself to put up signs to prevent future issues. I wrote, "Do not lock dressing room doors," with triple underlines. The emphasis was to grab attention, though maybe that was a bit naive on my part. We just assumed it was a child's mistake, and I was trying to avoid further confusion. Turns out, it was Karen who had locked the doors, and she was not happy about my signs. She came upstairs to the stage while I was rehearsing a scene and told me to meet her in the front office. I followed, and as soon as we were alone, she started berating me about the signs. She ranted about how disrespected she felt, mentioning her 30 years of experience again, and I was left utterly confused. If I recall correctly, she really focused on the number of exclamation points and underlines. I barely said anything during her tirade, partly because I couldn't get a word in and partly because I was just bewildered by how upset she was. I wasn't even angry at her, I was just astonished that something like this could set her off so much. Eventually, Mitch noticed the commotion and came in to see what was going on. After Karen explained why she was yelling at me, Mitch got angry at her. He started reprimanding her both for locking the doors and for yelling at me over the signs which he had approved. At this point, I just sat down and zoned out, waiting for the situation to blow over. In the end, I'm pretty sure Karen apologized to me, but honestly, apologies like that don't mean much to me. You shouldn't treat people that way in the first place, especially when you have 30 years of experience and should know better by now. It's not the most dramatic story, but it's the one that stuck with me. I have a few other stories from my time in the theater, but this one stands out the most in my memory. Story 6. For context, my biological father traumatized me, and my mom when I was 3. My mom already had bad experiences in the past with men and I from then was terrified of them too. But she was still open for dating and wanted me to have a father figure since the original one was a clear no LM. So she met a guy that I'll call Steve, and ever since I can remember I never had a good feeling about him. That feeling was quickly explained by lots of weird things that happened when I was still too young to remember, so I'm telling you here what my mom told me. And of course, as the years passed, I remembered more, so here it goes. She met this guy on a dating app, and the feeling between them passed correctly, though some stuff were odd. He was relying on his parents a lot for money-related things, and his ex was quite literally crazy. They had a dog which he had to pay the food for, but never got to see, and it was perfectly fine with him, but my mom, being his partner, put an end to this very quickly. Steve never had any children nor never was a close uncle to his nephews, so he never actually knew what taking care of a child implied. This is important for later. As the years passed, he was getting more and more aggressive with me mostly, and I never knew why. He would constantly yell at me for no reasons, and I remember a few particular instances where he really got on my nerves. The first one was when I was around 10 years old. I was walking around on a weekend in my own house in a tank top and underwear, normal for a child, right? Well, apparently not. As I was walking down the stairs to go get breakfast, he started, again, screaming at me and said something along the lines of, "Why are you walking around dressed like a slut?" Mind you, we didn't even have anyone in the house. It was just my mom, him and I, but she was sleeping so she did not hear any of this. He was generally very weird. And then came the age when I learned about sexuality and all of its implications, so I started understanding things that were happening at the time and that happened in the past. He never was sexually weird with me, but I therefore realized he was weird with my mom and almost constantly talking about sexual stuff when she was around. And the explanation for this was that my mom fell into depression and she didn't want to do stuff with him. So he was constantly trying to get her in the mood, not caring if I was around or not. So one day I just snapped. He was talking about sexual crap with my mom while we were dining, and I was disgusted because no kid likes to hear about their parents' fun times. So I said, "Bro, you have a hand, internet, a personal room and toilet paper. She obviously doesn't want you, so shut the F up and go to your thing on your own, or at least stop talking about that when we're eating." Yes, I developed a temper since I was tired of getting bullied by this fat ass, and he had the absolute audacity to say that I should be saying these things. Like, bro, you're the one who started talking about sexual stuff at the table FFS. But anyway, after that, like 3 years after my mom still accepted his proposal and got married. A few months before that I caught something weird again, and it didn't seem weird at first, but when my mom explained, I was disgusted. Steve was really into cars, but in a weird way, He'd listen to engines starting and be happy about it. Listen to them on loop and full volume in the house, and would show car stuff to everyone even though not a single soul in that house gave a shit about it. And so when I saw my mom and him on the couch with her trying to get away from him, showing her a video arm raised, I thought nothing of it other than, she clearly doesn't want to see whatever car crap he's showing her and will get a cramp in his arm if he stays like that for too long. So I told him, I think she's not really interested in the video you're showing her. And he, again, screamed at me for invading their couple life. And I didn't understand how a car video was invading their lives. But okay. Later on, my mom informed me that the video was in fact not about cars, but a very explicit video about libido that he was playing without headphones while I was right behind them doing my homework. A couple weird instances like that happened, but fast forward to the wedding. I still honestly don't know if I cried of joy or of sadness that day, but I did cry, and my mom was happy for once, so I tried to smile. I still don't know why she accepted to marry him, because he was being a bitch all the time. My mom has a very rare chronic illness that literally fuses her articulations with her bones, which is extremely painful, to which the only treatment that exists only slows down the process. And he already told her he would not take care of her if she was to get paralyzed because of her illness. And she needed crutches at the time to be able to move. 4 months after this, she realized he was cheating on her through the same app they met and was sharing all their bedroom moments and her traumatizing backstory. She confronted him, and he said he felt bad and needed someone to talk about everything. So she told him that she knew a few psychiatrists, but that none of them were reliable if he found them on dating apps, and that she felt horrible that he shared all her life with random strangers. But that somehow didn't engage the divorce process. During all the time we were all three as somewhat a family, he kept on implying that I was receiving better treatment than him from my mother, because she was telling me that she loved me. But not to him. I sure wonder why. And that I was receiving way more hugs than he did. And he kept on telling me that the wheel was turning when I was screaming back at him for more bullshit that he was mad about. But one day my mom had it. She couldn't take care of her own long hair anymore because of how much pain she had in her hands, and she decided to go get them cut without Steve knowing because he was fully against it, and she came home with much shorter hair. And when he came home, he snapped and made a big deal about it. Told her it made her look like an old sack and that he hated it. When she explained why she cut her hair, he answered with, "I don't care. I loved it long, so you should have kept it long." And 3 days later, she was telling me she was getting a divorce and an apartment for her and I. I was hyped, but didn't say anything because she wanted to tell him herself. But me being me, I vomited the whole thing when we had an argument which yet again went to, "I'm the one paying this and that, and if you're not happy about it, you're free to leave and get your own apartment," to which I answered in the heat of the moment, "Oh, do not worry about that. It's on its way." And when his jaw dropped, I realized what I just said and went upstairs from where I heard him cry. When we did move out, he tried to make me feel bad for his own actions, and in a moment where we were both alone, he told me, "Happy now? You finally got us to divorce. Your mom all for yourself now like you always wished." And I realized he was jealous of the love that my mom gave me, which is seriously weird WTF, and I answered with, "Remind me who she's separating herself from again. Thank you." And I left. He tried to get to her later with the famous, "I think I'll commit suicide if you don't come back." And my mom never cared because first if he was a coward and would never do it, and second if he's a grown-ass adult who makes his own choices, so why would she care? Everything was fine for the first week in our new place until we realized he was stalking us, and mostly my mom's car that she had to park near the road. So he knew if she wasn't home even after the divorce and would ask her why she wasn't home, etc. He kept being creepy until one day I posted a photo of my mom with long hair holding another man's hand of who we couldn't see the face of, who's now my current and way better stepdad than Steve ever was. Since then he blocked us all and stopped stalking us. In short, stepdad was jealous about my mom's relationship with me, mentally abused us for it until she asked for divorce. And he still acted like a bitch because he thought marriage was a trap for her to stay in, but stopped being annoying once my mom rebuilt her life.